Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Open Discussion. We are talking about the business of comics, and I'm going to say this the nicest way I could possibly say it is we are probably going to have a semi-heated discussion. There's going to be nuggets of truth here. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but we're going to kind of call things as we see it, and this is just information, and you can take it however you want to take it. But enough about that. Because I do want to introduce both my guests and give them a chance to promote themselves before we dive into all this. I have Johnny Reed, who does a lot of different stuff. He obviously has a comic shop, which I'm sure he's going to promote in 1 second. He also is the co-owner of Atrocity Press, and there's a comic and has a bunch of stuff going on there that I'm sure he's going to talk about. And then I have Paul Gomez on the other side, who also is doing a comic book and has a lot of stuff and has been on my show multiple times. And Johnny's been on my show a bunch of times as well. So before we dive too much into this topic, have a conversation. We're all going to be adults. Don't worry, everybody. We're all going to be adults in the room, or at least attempt to be. I want to give you guys a chance to promote yourself. So I figured, Johnny, do you want to start and kind of tell people who you are, what you do, a little information where they can find you before we dive too much into things?
Gotcha. I'm Johnny Reed. I'm owner of Brute Squad Entertainment in Kansas City. I do comics, toys, games, kind of an one-stop shop. Like I have Sideshow, Marvel, DC, McFarlane, 40K, Magic, you name it, I got it in here. When I'm not doing that, one of my other hats is I am co-owner of Atrocity Press with the man Max DeVille. He's kind of like my other half anymore. It's like I talk to the guy every day, and we're always writing, cooking up stuff. We do Mary Machine Gun. We do Human Hunters. We do Ninja Bimbos versus Zombies from Deep Space. Human Hunters is getting ready to launch. Shameless plug. That's going to be on Kickstarter in the next 2 weeks. That's our next one. And we're going to be adding 2 new titles to kind of the run next year. Also, when I'm not doing that, I work with Fountain City Comic Con here in Kansas City, promoting it's a smaller con here in KC, but growing. And my main job, I also work for Play to Beat Brain Cancer. It's a nonprofit organization where we sell all kinds of gaming dice and gaming equipment and all the fun D&D stuff. And then we use the proceeds to help people with brain cancer. So there you go. There's my resume. I don't sleep a lot.
Well, I'm Paul Gomez. I make a comic. That's my resume. I host a show on Wednesdays at Paul Gomez 790 on YouTube. My comics are PTSD, Cryptic Haze, Prelude to Aurora, and my flagship comic is called Bushibu Circus Mysteries, and I'm working on issue 3 right now. It's not going to come out until probably January, but I'm getting there. Other than that, I really don't got much else. I'm sponsored by a local comic store called Geek Out in Burleson, opening a second store in Mansfield, Texas. That's it.
And then since we're all promoting, I'll promote myself briefly before we dive in, because I think it'll segue right where we want to be. Obviously, I run this show. I run Conversations in Pop Culture. I have an eBay store called Pop Anime Comics Collectibles, and I deal with a lot of cards. I deal with a lot of comics. I deal with a lot of fun merch and cool stuff like that. And I got a bunch of fun stuff dropping in the next 2-3 weeks in my store. So if you like Bad Girl art, I probably got some for you. If you don't, well, you might be offended. So I will apologize ahead of time. Buyer beware is all I'm going to say in my shop, in my store on eBay. But this is what I want to get into, because obviously I think the 3 of us come from different angles in comics. Obviously, I have an eBay shop. Johnny has a physical store, as well as being a publisher, a writer, creator, and Paul, you have a comic. And so I'm curious how you guys see where comics has been evolving in business, because my viewpoint, I was speaking with Tyler Carpenter. He put out a tweet today, and he was kind of, stating something about marketing. And I said, well, it depends on cash flow in comics right now, because I think a lot of creators, and it's just my take, don't understand that their comic is a business. And I think a lot of people think that, hey, my comic is a project, and then I want to make it into a business when it should be a business, and your comic is a product. And so I'm curious how you two feel about that, because I think there's a misconception And I think it's a hard reality that needs to be addressed.
So I think it's a two-prong approach, really, because I think you're marketing two different things. Because I truly believe it's marketing. Then again, my backing and my degrees in business marketing, so I'm going to go that direction anyway. But I think it's not just selling the book; you're also selling yourself, because you're trying to sell that book, you're trying to sell that product. For us, let's take our books. We're going to actually go with Human Hunters, Mary Machine Gun. We want to do our best marketing to get people to read that book, to get it out in the stores. But a lot of it is also building up your reputation. That way people aren't just buying every book, the Mary book, the Hunter book. It'll be anything we put out. It gets that extra step further, that you get their trust, you get their loyalty. And then you're marketing yourself. You yourself are a brand, where it's like, hey, I know a lot of people, Jason Aaron's a KC guy, if Jason Aaron does a book, it's going to be on their pull list. If he's doing Punisher, if he's doing Thor, now he's got a Batman book. I got people that never read Batman, but it's Jason Aaron, so they're going to buy it. So for me, that marketing is a big thing, and it's marketing your book and it's marketing yourself.
So sorry to, before I want to follow up, do you feel that sometimes, people also might have a misconception on what actually is the product too? Because it could be that obviously if you have a comic book, that is a physical product, but
right.
I was speaking to somebody and it's their brand. I mean, Jonathan Hendricks is a good example of that, where he might do a book for Scout, but then he'll go to Mad Cow and then he'll do something with Marvel, and then he develops a following. So maybe there's also a flip side of that where, Jonathan Hendricks is the actual product. The comic book might be a secondary product, but it's kind of a brand. It's kind of like Apple, right?
Yeah.
Apple does a Mac, they do a watch, they do an iPhone, they do your iPad. And somebody says, I'm pure Apple. And so Apple has built up that reputation. And this is where I think, people get really mixed up. But obviously, because that's how I feel, even about my eBay business, is that my business is that I'm going to deliver you your items perfectly. And that's what I think is that. But I'm also going to deliver your product perfectly. So, it's tricky. And this is why I want to have this conversation, because I think it's a very weird thing. But I don't know if Paul was going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with him. I think things have evolved from 20, 30 years ago, even 10, 15, that before, whenever you had a comic, you would go to a publisher and the publisher would take the comic and sell the comic itself. Nowadays, whenever you have Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and stuff like this, and you have so many more indie publishers that the author, the artist, and whatnot start becoming their own brand. And this is how the reasoning is because instead of just selling a title, you're selling the product and reputation from the people who are making it. And I don't think that was the case before, because I think before it was like they only had a certain amount of publishers and comics coming out. Nowadays, the field is so crowded and there are so many more publishers that people start to relate to the writers or the artists. And it's kind of started becoming that way, whenever Image and other brands started losing their brand recognition, as opposed to the artists and creators that are on board. That's what I think.
Well, and I think, to what you said, the difference between 30 years ago and now is that you could have a great book and you take it to a publisher. If they don't like it, it's not going anywhere. You'd have to shop that book around because you'd have to get these publishers to do it. Now with our day and age of computers and everything, you don't need that kind of okay now. You can do it yourself. As long as you got the money and you got the talent, I don't need a publisher to put my book. I can do it as an indie. I can do it in an individual. We have Atrocity Press that recreated, but we didn't have to. We could have just been a Max DeVille book or a Johnny Reed book. And that's the beauty of the time we live in, is that you don't have to and it's the same thing in music. You used to always have to go to your music producers. And if they didn't like you, you didn't go anywhere. Now you can create your own YouTube channel and drop your music out there. So it's a real fascinating time because you get to market. Going back to, around, you can market yourself. You get to actually be your own brand, and you're not relying on somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah, let's actually dive into this, because I think it's really interesting on what even is a product, because I think this also goes to a question is that with creators, and to even go further, is that some people in comics want to just produce a comic and they want their project and they're trying to just break even. And then there's also the creators who want to run a business. So obviously I run an eBay business, Johnny, you, and I think I can speak for Max. I know Max was commenting in that, and he left a comment. So I want to give a shout out to Max and Atrocity Press there for commenting. But one of the things is that, running a business in comics is also very different, where I think it's a mentality versus, because I think some people come into this, say, look, I just want to tell a story and I want to have a good time. I also think some people sometimes come in to a position saying, I'm just going to tell my story and see where it goes. Because I know a bunch of creators say, hey, look, I just want to tell a story, and then if it turns into a business, and that's a very different journey as well. But I also think that this is a culture issue, where obviously if you run a comic shop, that's a business from this inception. There's no way you can just walk in and say, I'm going to open up a comic shop and it's a project. It's a business from start to finish. And so, I'm curious how you two feel about that, because when I started my eBay business, it initially started out as a side hustle of me just having excess things. And then it slowly evolved 10 years later into what it is now, which is a full-fledged business. But it is a business. And so I think that's something that is also a problem, where, the business is not just marketing yourself or you as the business, but it's also how you even set the whole thing up and how you run, because there's a lot of ways you can make money in comics. I know Paul does a lot of stuff with that. Between, and I'm sure Paul will go into explaining how he makes a lot of money doing this.
Well, I don't know about a lot of money, but it's a fascinating thing. If you're talking to a lot of creators, if you take 10 creators and start asking them, why are you in it for? Are you trying to make money? Are you trying to even out? And a lot of them are going to be, I just want to get my story out. Most of them probably say they came in not knowing. I didn't know. But one of the things I did know was, if I was going to create a comic, I would have to figure out the X, Y, and Z, how much it cost, how much it would cost to break even. And, every time you start a business, you're probably going to take a loss right away. And I kind of figured that into my business plan. I don't think a lot of creators think about that. I don't think they think about the business plan, about how much they're going to spend, not only on their comic, but on how they're going to market it and how they're going to present it. Me personally, I went and studied conventions before I even got a table. So that was one of the things that I did. And I don't hear that many creators doing that. They kind of go in not knowing what to do. And it's like, how do you go in, not know what to do, and expect to get a profit from it? Then
See, I do that a lot. I agree with you, because we do a lot of cons for the charity I work for. But we won't do a con until we go in as a spectator first.
Yeah.
And we, is it going to be worth our effort? Is it going to be worth the time? Is the price of the table worth the amount that we're going to be able to sell at that table? Yeah, and you're right, though. I totally agree. There's a lot of people that, this is going to be a great con, and they go into it, and then they're down $5,000 after.
Yeah. And they don't understand. There's a cost for the table. There's a cost to get there. There's a cost for, just to eat there and stuff like that. You got to all that in.
I'll throw something else. Sorry to interrupt. But let's say you have a 9-to-5 job and you have to use a vacation day. You're getting paid for your Friday still, or your Monday, or whatever it is. But that vacation day, if you're married, that's a day you don't get to spend with your significant other. That's a day you don't get to lay in bed. That's a day that maybe you're at a company where you have 20 sick days. I don't know. But I just started at a company. I have 10. Those 10 days are covenant for me.
Yeah.
And I understand I'm in year one of my job. But to me, that's also an expenditure where it's not costing money, but it's time. If you're working at a con, at a table for 32 hours, that's 32 hours of work. But sorry for interrupting.
No problem. But the last thing I was really going to talk about that a lot of creators don't think about are getting into the LCSs without a publisher. going and spending that time and talking to them and seeing if they're willing to take your book in. And usually, in my experience, I guess you could say, it wasn't always a one and done thing. It wasn't, I go to the store, drop a few books, they buy them, come back and then buy more. It was usually me bringing a demo for the store owner to read, coming back, seeing what they like, seeing how I could help them and how they could help me. So it was always a process that took a long time, but you don't see a lot of the creators understand that. They just want the money and they don't expect to do the footwork or, the time to build up to build the relationship to the LCSs or the conventions or putting the time into doing the Kickstarter or crowdfunding. This is the time they don't think about.
Let's actually dive into that. So I'll talk about me, and I haven't really spoken about this, but right now I have some business deals where it's a promotional trade. So obviously I sell a lot of books on eBay, and what I'm doing now is I'm actually putting people's promos and some swag that they send me as a promotional. So think about it like how you get a free bobblehead at, a baseball game, right? Or you get a free like hand gloves from a company. So that's what's going on, and I have 2 or 3 of those right now that have sort of been somewhat finalized. But those relationships took about 2 to 3 years. They took several interviews with people to get there. Not even intentionally, but just knowing people and then throwing a suggestion. It's like, yo, this is a great idea. The fact that you're sending out 50 to 70 packages every single month, and you're going to put my Kickstarter that I'm launching in 2 months from now in those packages, in 140 to 200 packages, why not? And most of the packages are comics. So that has taken years to build. Even sponsors have taken years to build on my show. And I mean, I'm not talking huge amounts of money. It's how I'm breaking even. And for the first time, I'm breaking even on my show. But I don't think you touched on something about relationships. And I think this is something that people don't really want to do. And I don't know if it's my generation that we all want to just text each other and we don't want to pick up a phone call and pick up and say, hey, is the owner in his shop? I'd love to drop off some books, see what he thinks, and maybe, that. And we're in generation now and generation me and generation today. And I don't really know why that is, but I think it's a real problem in this industry.
No, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things, like I said, it's more of a self-gratification or that gratification of now kind of thing. The newer creators don't want to go out there. And I see a lot of them wanting to sell it at the same price that they're selling it at conventions to like LCSs. A lot of them don't understand that the LCSs got to make money and then you got to make money. And when you go into a publisher, they're going to get their split as well.
Yeah, let's ask Johnny about that. Johnny might have some insight into running an LCS. I don't know. I mean,
I got a few years in it.
I mean, this is right up your alley where if somebody, because I think you carry some indie books in your store. And, obviously.
I actually even have a section of just Kickstarters for a lot of the guys that are doing Kickstarters. Like Laura, she's got, the Pale Rider one, that's on Kickstarter. She just set me up my own personal tier on her Kickstarter. And then when it's over with, she sends me the books and I'll be putting them on my shelf. So I'm trying to do what I can as an LCS to try to promote the Kickstarters and the indies. Because, you have indie books in Diamond, don't get me wrong. But there's even that other layer of those Kickstarters that aren't big enough to get into previews yet.
See, it's interesting. Where I don't know your number where you need it, but what I need as an eBay store is I need a 50% discount. So if somebody's selling their book for $15 on Kickstarter, I need your book to be $750 in my possession or around that number, because I need some room where I don't need to make millions of dollars off of somebody's indie book, but I need to make enough money where I can at least have a little bit of the bone and meat on the bone, where I have certain relationships with people. I have a good relationship with Dustin Burnell and he sells me his books for $7.50, and we're testing the market. And this is something that I think that a lot of people, where I go on retail tiers, and when somebody's tier is $10 for their book and they want to sell me 10 books, and I'm like, but that's $3 cheaper than what you're selling it on tier A. Like, I can't make money when eBay is taking 13%. I don't know what Whatnot takes at the moment because I'm not on Whatnot, but all of a sudden there's other expenses in business. And I try to explain to people saying, hey, I'm interested in your book, but your prices price me out where there's not enough meat for me to eat. And how can I help you? And how can I be a customer where I understand that you are trying to figure out retail? But I think that a lot of these people on Kickstarter alone don't know how to say, you have a store, you have an eBay store, you have another Whatnot platform. What price would work for you? And I think that's the problem.
And the brick and mortar, I mean, it's a lot different. I'll be honest. It is. A lot of people compare it, but I sell stuff on eBay. You get your fee and you're done. Brick and mortar. Oh, wait a minute. I got rent. Oh, wait, you have utilities. Oh, wait, all of a sudden you have your regular state tax. Oh, wait, here's, our county collector wants a layer of taxes. There's all these different layers that have to be done.
It's also, not to interrupt you, but there is a position when you have a store where how much square footage do you need? Where this is a real issue, because I think people forget that I store my comics in my basement. I have a finished basement. It works. So obviously I don't have a warehouse because I have a finished basement that's plenty spacious. So I don't have that problem. So I don't have a square footage issue in my business. I don't have to deal with that. But you have to understand that, sure, 10 comics might not seem like it takes up square footage, but it does.
Yeah.
And it also takes up other opportunity in other books that could be displayed. And that's the other thing, too, that I think people forget. And I mean, I'm going to say something, and feel free to correct me because I might be misspeaking here, but comic shops, I'm going to say this the nicest way I can say, they do have wasted space sometimes, unfortunately, because I mean, and it's nothing like you have beautiful racks up, but like you need to allow people to see the rack and get to the rack, and you can't like put product there versus in a like Macy's.
Oh, I got a big wasted space in the back of my store. I got 2 banks of 3 theater seating, and I got a big movie screen in the back. I mean, I have a mini movie theater in my shop. But sometimes but see, that goes back to your marketing. That's when I'm a gaming shop. Guys come in here to game, their kids, their girlfriend, significant other, they'll go watch a movie.
Yeah.
And that way the guys are I'm going to stay longer. And then a lot of times they buy more, plus it's just, for me, like I'm trying to make a community shop vibe. For me, it's not like you were talking about, like you need 50%. See, for me, it's not always 50% because it also goes back to what you said about the networking and the connections you make with people. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I really believe in this person. What can I do to help them? I may only make $1 off their book, but I believe in them enough that I want to try to make them to that plateau.
See, I try, but I also understand that I have 13%, then I have taxes, and then their shipping comes in, and I'm not making, if somebody like on Dustin Burnell, I'm not making $7.50 on his book. I'm making maybe $5 on his book. And I'm happy to, and I'm thrilled to be supporting him. And it works because he's happy to give me a 50% discount. And the problem though becomes when somebody wants me to buy, they're selling their book for 20 and they want to give it to me for 15 on a retail package. That number doesn't work. Where I'm like, we need to figure out a better number, or we need to figure out how we get me there. Because if I need to order 25 of your book to get it down to 12, we can now work something out. And that's where I think this all fails on sometimes with Kickstarter. I mean, Timothy B. Fling, he gives me his books for $5 for 20 books. And that works amazingly because that's a great deal for him. It's a great deal for me. And I really believe in his project. And so the numbers work. And even if he was charging me $120, the numbers still work. If he was charging me $200, the numbers don't work. And so it's like, that's where I have a real hard time in my business, where I like to support people's projects on a retail level, but it's so hard when somebody's like $300 for 20 books. And I'm like, I will lose money. It's like, I'm trying here.
So, one of the things that, I talk to new creators, and I'm pretty new myself. I'm barely hitting the 2-year mark. But, I've gotten into about 40 LCSs, and the way I did that was the first thing I ask them is, how can I help you? As opposed to, help me out and buy my book at full cost. No, it's how can I help the LCS? I've always told other creators, even if you don't make money on an LCS selling them your book, one of the good things that you could always do is ask them, hey, can I come into the store and table? And then you can make some money that way as well. So I honestly believe, even if I'm not making books selling to the LCS, making much selling to the LCS, I get that opportunity to talk to their clientele sometimes. And that's even worth a lot more. There's also some LCSs that don't want to buy the book and would rather do consignment. And I know a lot of creators are against that. But again, if you're having your book in an LCS, it's going to get seen by their customers. Why wouldn't you want that advertisement? I mean, wouldn't it be worth it even to sell your book or at less than cost? I'm not saying you should sell your book at less than cost, but I'm saying, isn't it worth it? I think so. And helping the LCS, man, there's a lot of LCSs that are struggling. So if they're making them $1 or $2 extra off my book, I'm good with it. And if one of the things I do before I do get a table signing, because I'll call and check with them, hey, do you have some of my books before I get there? And if not, let me give you some, sell you some, whatever, so you can sell them to the customers before I get there and say, hey, he's coming in this week. You can have him signed whenever he gets there. And I think a lot of the LCSs appreciate that because, again, they're going to make $1 or $2. They're going to advertise you to their customers even while you're not there. And then their customers are going to come back while you are there. So everybody benefits. But I think a lot of the creators, like I said, they just want to sell it at their cost, and they kind of are hard to move away from it. I think that's one of the biggest problems is in indies. They're selling it for $10 where Batman's only like, what, $4.99 or something like that? Nobody
$3.99. The average price on the comic anymore is $3.99, $4.99. They kind of split which ones they are.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're selling it to an LCS at $5, you're competing with Batman that everybody knows. I usually try. I mean, just me. I'm trying to get the LCS a few dollars and be able to compete with Batman. So they're making money, and again, as a new creator, I'm trying to get advertisement more than anything. Yeah, sure, I'm making a few extra dollars, but most of my money comes from conventions and signings. Just because I go to an LCS with my books, I've got a lot more variants. Usually I just sell them my A cover unless they specifically want the variants. So whenever I go to a signing, I'll make $1 or $2 off my variants, prints, extra stuff. And that's what I tell the new creators. I'm like, look, that's where you're going to make your money. If you know what you're selling, if you know how to sell your stuff off your table, and if you're building that relationship with these customers, with these LCSs, that's one of the things I think a lot of people don't take into consideration.
No. I get it. I mean, I get it completely. I mean, it's not easy, and I think relationship building is terrifying. I do. I really do. It is so hard to build relationships, and it is terrifying. I mean, I'm an interviewer by trade, and I just shoot out emails, and people say, "Hey, how'd you get that guest?" And I'm like, "I asked, and I just shot a nice email." And what people don't understand is that if I do 150 interviews a year, I shot out 1,500 emails to get that. That's a 10% rate. That's a shitty rate. But the reason why I get 150 interviews with some people who are some of the best in the world at what they do, and look, some of it's luck. Some of it's complete luck. Sometimes you just hit somebody up at the right time. You know, every once in a while you get a W, right? In your corner. Tegan Knox was a W for me. She's Nick to the well, guys. She's great. She's so good in NXT. She's so good. She should be the champ. I'm just saying. But anyway, I digress right there. Sometimes you just hit people up at the right time, but it is terrifying because I shoot out an email and somebody could snap at me and say, Andrew, you're a horrible person. How dare you reach out to me? Burn in hell, and I hope you die. And I've gotten responses like that. They're not fun, and they make you question what you're doing, and then you go cry, and then maybe you do something else. But I think it's the idea that I was speaking with Chuck Pinu and Tom Hutchinson, and we were talking about the issue of work ethic. And there is a problem, I think, with a lot of creators who just don't want to do the work. And they look at some of these top people like Scott Snyder and James Tylan, and, you know, Jason Aaron might be a good one to it's Jason Aaron or Aaron Jason. I get it mixed up. But nonetheless, and then they look at people like, you know, Ebass, and they look at people who are killing it in that regard. Pat Chan is a good one. And they don't realize that those people put in the work. Yeah. And I think that's part of the issue. I mean, I'll say very nicely about Max and you, Johnny. I think you two have put in the work. I think, Paul, you put in the work. I mean, what people don't understand is that this is 10 years of me interviewing, and I just feel I'm getting good. I don't feel like I feel like I'm average, to be honest. But it took me a long time to get here, and I'm still getting good. I'm not great. I'm not the best in the world. I just feel like I'm just getting good, and it's probably going to be another 10 years before I'm even going to be good, or maybe, dare I say, great. But I've put in a lot of work, and I think that's part of the problem is that it's the generation now, and they don't want to learn and pick up a business book and say, cool, how do I build a relationship? How do I, look at costs? How do I analyze this? And how do I figure out a way on how to make money? I mean, that's the problem. I mean, I don't know how many ways, you make money. Well, I think you went through some of them, but obviously in your shop, Johnny, you make money in a lot of different ways.
Yep.
I mean, I think I could say this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you obviously bring in collections. I think you sell new books. I think you sell games. I think you probably have game night. You sell Magic the Gathering and Warhammer, yep, things like that. And then obviously you have a few other jobs outside of your shop. And yep, so I think that's the thing too, is that great if you're a comic person, and anybody could cut me off at any point, but you have your book, but then you have your con stuff, and then you sell to LCSs, and then you can sell on eBay, whatnot, or you can then go and find somebody like me who might want to buy a variant from you.
Right.
And here you go. And I think that that's part of the problem here, is that people want a direct route. And I don't think that they want to say, I am running a business with multiple facets. It's almost like, a Venn diagram might be a good way to view it. So,
no, and I agree. I mean, it takes in the work. It takes the work to do it. Again, I've only been doing this for a little under 2 years, but whenever I started out, I knew I had to make a name for myself. I went on Comic Crusaders, and I did 2 shows with them. And then whenever that kind of closed down, I went to Pops' channel and did a show on his channel. And, that didn't exactly work the way I wanted it to. So now I'm starting my own channel, and it's not like I've got hundreds of people watching, but I'm still going to push that each and every week to get myself out there. Me personally, I get scared whenever I'm going on a stream or whatnot, and I don't want to miss.
I'm terrified.
Yeah.
So mean.
I mean, it does take the work. It did take, going to the conventions and learning how to present things. It took, weeks and hours and weeks to learn how to present myself, my pitch, my book. And that's on top of the creating aspect. After all that, I mean, it was days, weeks, months that it took to get into the LCSs that I'm in. And to have one of them sponsor me, man, it just blew my mind. They sponsor my my YouTube channel. They sponsor my last project, and they're talking about sponsoring my next one, and that's not something that they do for everybody. So it's kind of, if you do the groundwork, if you're out there talking, meeting, understanding, and learning every day, you're bound to get somewhere. Yeah.
I agree. It's tricky, and I just think it's a problem. But I do want to switch it over to Johnny a little bit and talk about maybe even the other side of this, because I think we touched upon it, but I think that there is also a disconnection between creators and comic shops at this point, where I don't think a lot of creators understand how a comic shop works. I don't think a lot of creators understand how my eBay business works. And I think it's a real issue. And I don't know about you guys, but I legitimately every week have 50 to 60 options on what I can bring into my store every single week. And I pick a tenth of those at best. Most weeks, last week I didn't touch anything because I don't like anything in the market. And I don't get the ability. If I wanted to, I could probably get it, but collections don't come into my eBay store. I deal with a lot of modern books. I deal with a lot of exclusive books. I deal with a lot of wholesale. So I don't have that because I don't have a brick and mortar store. But I think there is also a disconnection, even with just the public and even with the fans to some degree, about how a comic shop actually operates. And I think that that's a real issue as well, because it goes back to retail. It goes back to business, because I think if people understood, and this is just my experience, when people understand why people do a certain thing a certain way, they understand how a company operates. They say, oh, I get why they did that in that fashion, and I get why they're doing it this way. And I think it's a real issue when people do not understand. And maybe, I don't know if they don't want to. I get that people are busy in life. If you have kids, if you have a young one running around, maybe you're not so concerned about somebody else's business and how it's operating. But I do think that if you want to be successful in comics, you need to know how things operate.
Well, you need to know your product. I think a lot of it, because I've been around comic shops that don't make it, and some that do. I think talking about individuals coming in and not understanding. I think a lot of people, they come into a comic shop and they think it's a garage sale. Like, hey, will you take this for that? Will you take this for that? And they're always looking for that deal. And for me, it's always like, I can't sell it for that. Well, why can't you take $10 off? I go, because then I don't make a profit. And I'm like, it's not like a garage sale where this is stuff that's sitting in my driveway that I'm trying to get rid of. No, this is stuff I'm trying to sell, make a profit so I can pay for my bills. So I can keep the lights on, so I can pay utilities, so I can order the new comics that come out next month, because, like for me, you have to sell those ones that are on the stand so you can make a profit enough to go sell the ones next week that come in. And then the following week, comics are weekly. So, you have a bill every week hitting you, it's even worse now for comics shops. Now the DC left and they're Lunar, it's like, now you don't have just the minimum order of Diamond. You got the minimum order of Diamond and the minimum order of Lunar. So it's like, oh, great. Now I got to double the amount of comics that I would normally get to hit that margin. Because I remember back when everybody was like, hooray. And I think that's really showed the disconnect. All these people are like, finally, comics are leaving, Diamond. It's so much better. And I'm like, not for the retailers, it's not. Now we got to put in 2 orders every week, every month. Now we got to do 2 different orders we got to break down. I'm like, you doubled our work. It's not a better deal. And everybody was like, oh, Diamond's going to lower their prices. No, they're not. They're Diamond. That's not going to happen. If anything, they're going to raise their prices to accommodate that lost margin. And that's the big thing with the brick and mortar. When people come in, like you said, it's knowing this isn't a garage sale. It is a business, just like Target, just like everything else. Like my biggest thing is like also with action figures. Target's buying action figures, probably 50 million of the new Star Wars figures, across the U.S. So they're probably getting those figures for $5 a piece. You get a store like me, then I'm lucky if I get them for 20 a piece. But if I don't sell them for the same price as Target, somebody's going to go buy it at Target. So there's my input on like people not truly understanding, because, especially when you're competing against big retailers, that in some cases you are.
Yeah, I think sometimes people also don't understand buy local versus buy corporation. Look, I love Target. I love Walmart. Don't get me wrong. I get groceries from Target. I love going to Target, but I'm not an action figure guy. I buy my groceries and I buy my ice cream from Target.
Right.
I'll buy baseball cards from Target, but in reality, they're the same price as they are on Barnes & Noble, and they're the same price on eBay, and they're the same price on Amazon. So when I'm buying a Topps Chrome set, it's $35 at Target, it's $35 at Barnes & Noble, so it's $35 on Amazon, and it's like $45 at a card shop. So I'm well aware that it's not, I'm not getting much of a discount at Target, all things considering, but I try, and I think that's the other thing too, that sometimes you will buy and you should buy local. And I think that's a misconception too, just as a consumer relationship, where there are people who will spend $5 more with me in my eBay store than somebody else because they like the way I pack it up. They know I'm going to be responsive, and they know that if there's a problem, that I'm going to address it and I'm going to fix it really quickly. And they also don't have a problem with paying another $3 more in shipping because, again, their book is going to arrive correctly and perfectly. And I think that's something that is also missing with some of these people and understanding. And I think it's also even just on a creation side. I'm a strong believer that if you run a business or you're running a Kickstarter project, you should have an idea of every step of the process. And that includes, I think every creator on Kickstarter should spend a day in a comic shop and just shadowing somebody, because I think it would change the culture. I really think it would change the culture. I really do. So like, I get how complicated retail is. And whether that's Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, or whether it's Thursday, I think it would change the culture. And I think it's a really big problem, because until people understand that and they get immersed in a business, they don't understand how it functions. And I think that's the missing side a lot with comics, especially on the indie front right now. But that's just my take. I could be misconstrued completely, because I don't think people understand how stressful my eBay business can be. And I think people have a misconception of what that looks like, and how complicated things are with that. And there's been more problems than not in my eBay business that I've slowly figured out. So I think people say, "Oh man, you're doing great in your eBay business, and you're going to sell 90,000 this year." I'm not making 90,000. I'm making way less than that. Just because I'm selling a lot of books doesn't mean that's what I'm bringing in on a revenue level. And I think that's another misconception right now in comics, dramatically.
No, and I agree with you. So like whenever I started with my first book, which was PTSD, and I had a lot of success with that. I guess I kind of came out with my numbers, and everybody, was like, "Hey, you obviously making a lot of money." But again, it was, going to the conventions, buying the tables, and then going to the comic shops, selling them for a little bit less than I do at conventions, obviously. And I wasn't making as much as most people were thinking. Of course, it was enough for me to go roll into my next 2 books, but it wasn't exactly, I don't know, mounds of money that I could swim in. It helped pay the bills, and like I said, it helped my next 2 books. But a lot of people don't think about the cost per printing, the cost for all the items, the cost per shipping, and that's definitely one of the biggest things is shipping. I didn't realize it whenever I first started. And of course, marketing. One of the things I did for marketing was I got ash cans. And I know a lot of people told me not to get ash cans, but it really helped get my foot in the door in some of the LCSs, and it helped me get a few customers just having those ash cans. and handing them out. But that was a cost that I rolled into the business, and I knew it was going to hit me at the beginning. There's a lot of things that people don't take into consideration, but mostly it's I guess the cost per printing, the cost per cover art and whatnot, the extra stuff. Yeah, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't take into consideration.
I'm more than happy to explain. So I buy a lot of Mount Olympus books. Most of Mount Olympus books are $20. I sell those things for $50 to $60 on average. On a $50 book, I will explain to you how this gets broken down. So the way I run my business is that I will buy one of those books for $20. I'll sell it if I'm lucky for $50. I charge $13 shipping. That's what I charge. Some people love it, some people hate it. So I'm at 63. eBay they charge tax on that, and then I get 13%. So that brings it up to about $66, give or take, $67. That thing gets dropped out down to about 61 after eBay fees to 60. On that 60, I still have to take out $13 for the shipping, brings me down to 47. Then I take down to 20. So now I'm at 27. And then I got to set aside about 20% of that to 25% for taxes. And whatever is left over of that is my profit. So we just went from $67 down to about 15.
Right.
After we are all said and done. Now, this is not my day job. This is a side hustle. But when you're moving 70 to 100 books and you're making 15 a pop, but I'm not making 15 a pop on every single book. I'm sometimes making more. I'm sometimes making less. But obviously, all of a sudden, this is how you get a very complicated business. But that's what people don't understand. But it gets more complicated in my business because I deal with pre-sales. So what's happened to me is because I deal with pre-sales, people get antsy. They're well aware that it's a pre-sale, and a company takes an extra, 60 days sometimes to deal with things. Nothing wrong with that. This is the business of comics. This is the business that shit happens, and then somebody wants to cancel. And because of that now, I actually, when I get paid, if it's a pre-sale, I put it into a separate escrow account, which is a high yield savings account where I'm getting 4%. So I can't even touch that money until the item arrives and it's shipped out. So if that's a 60-day outing, that's 2 months where I can't even touch that capital, which means that it has to come from somewhere else. And this is how complicated my eBay business is right now. But it provides me protection while providing me some coverage. God forbid something happens. And so this is where I think people do not understand how complicated it is and why I charge what I charge and what happens with this, because that's what I have to do. I have to provide protections for myself in any format because I've been burned way too much. In the last 6 months, I have been burned and I have taken on probably about $3,000 of losses because of that. But my growth has massively exceeded that. But that's what happens when you have a $35,000 to $40,000 growth in 6 months of sales, not of revenue. So that's where I'm at. This is why it is so complicated with what I do, and this is why I get frustrated. I'm the first person to say it, where when somebody doesn't understand why I say this isn't working and we can't do business, your numbers don't work, you got to realize that I'm making 20%, maybe 24% after all said and done, and assuming 80% risk. And I don't have a problem if that's the price to pay for me participating in this and being entrepreneuristic. I don't know if that's a word, but that's not my problem. But if you don't understand where I'm at and what's going into it, and I would imagine that comic shops are similar. I would even imagine producing a book for the first time is similar to that philosophy.
Well, I think whenever it comes to producing the books, most people don't take into consideration how much it actually costs. Making a book is about $3,000-$4,000 just to get the book. That's before you add in the shipping, the bags and boards and all the extra swag, before you get the tables for the conventions, before, gas and hotels. before all the gas to get to the LCSs to sell the book. Before you sell anything, it's probably going to cost you a good three to 5,000 just starting out. So that's where I'm in. I took my loss at the beginning that way, and then just reinvested. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that and understand it before going into it. They just think they're going to make a comic and it's going to sell, and it's just not that simple.
Well, and I think a lot of it also depends. I hate to say it, but like if you're talking just the comic company side of things, I think it depends on whether you break it down to even being a writer versus an artist. I mean, 9 times out of 10, the writers are paying for everything. You know, you don't have an artist that goes to a writer and says, "Hey, I'll pay you so much a page to write my comic." But 99% of the time, the writers are like, "We're paying you per page." You know, every now and then you do get some equal, you know, you'll get somebody that wants to do a 50-50 collaboration, but that's pretty rare in this industry, really. So for me, coming from a writing standpoint, you know, our biggest cost is art.
Yeah.
You know, because nobody's paying us to write it, but we're having to pay these artists to create all the art. So that's something like from day one, we have to factor in, you know, how much is this art going to cost us? Then how much is it going to cost to print? You know, for us, it's like, how much is it going to cost us before we even talk about anything else?
Yep.
Just to get it where we can read it on a screen.
Do you also feel that, because I was speaking with JD Calderon, and one of the things is that obviously if you do offset printing, which I think is 3,000 or more, and again, I'm not the expert on this, so nobody should quote me. I've never printed anything. I think it's 3,000 or more. Obviously it's cheaper, but then again, you're going to spend more money up front. And then if obviously you print 250 versus 500, you might get a slight discount if you print 500. Obviously if it's not offset, but they might give you $100 off. And then it becomes a whole business quagmire, because if you know you're going to have 4 issues of a book and you're going to need a bunch of issue 1, how much money do you want to spend up front that might cover you for issues 1, 2, and 3 versus saying you just want to cash flow it? And I think this is where this gets really complicated in business. This is where this gets, I think, a little bit controversial, is that, well, if you raise enough money to print what you need to print, should you go further in the hole if it's going to save you money later on? And this goes into debt relationships. And I don't want anybody to incur debt they don't need to incur, but it also goes into risk reward. And it's like, this is my whole thing with comics, is that makes it complicated, is that it's almost managing money. It's very much a managing money game. And it's very much how much debt is healthy for me as a business to occur, because I hate to say this, but I know so many creators who are broke. And it's been one of these deterrents for me to create a book is I don't want to be broke. I hate to say it, like I have stories that I would love to tell, but I don't want to be broke. And it's a really hard position for me personally to say, do I go spend $6,000, not fund a Roth IRA, and do my comic book that could or could not work? And it's a very, very complicated issue for me. And this is why I'm on this side of the coin versus on eBay and selling books, because I have cash flow in that regard. But I don't think that I'm alone in this struggle. I don't. Or at least I think people can understand it, hopefully.
So, I mean, it's one of those things that you do have to balance, and you have to figure out what you want to do. So whenever I first started, you know, I kind of took into consideration that I was going to take a loss. Now, that didn't happen with PTSD. That sold amazingly well. But then it came to, was I going to buy inventory? Was I going to spend it into the next book? How was I going to spend that money? Most of that money went into cons, because if you know how to do cons, is you've got to buy a table months ahead of time. And so that's going to take some of your capital away right away. Are you going to be able to get that offset printing? You're talking about a few thousand as well. I mean, that's what, 4 or 5 cons that you could get instead. So you're losing out on making profit on those cons. And then again, like I said, are you going to put it into your next book? Now, I didn't have that much money whenever I started. I had enough to make, PTSD. And because it did so well, I got like 3 tables, and then I went into my next book. I couldn't get that stockpile of comics that I would have loved to got offset, because I think I would have been able to blow through them by now. But again, you have to weigh those decisions. I went into and got my next 2 books, and like I said, about 4 or 5 cons, tables, and whatnot, so I could experience it, to learn how to sell it. But that's one of those things that you really have to weigh. Right now, I started doing art. You've seen my art getting a little bit better. I would love to go get an iPad, but again, do I want to get an iPad? I've got 5 books that I need to kind of stock up inventory. I've got only 1 convention that I have a table for at the moment. So it's like, where do I put all that money? Or what little money I have. So yeah, I mean, it really takes a balancing of what you're going to do. I've got a little bit of money put aside because I have to fulfill my last campaign. But again, like I said, where I make most of my money is my conventions, and I only got 1 table lined up, and that's 3 months from now. So it's like, where am I going to balance? What am I going to not buy this week so I can make more money next week?
I mean, I don't know what that looks like in a comic shop, but obviously collections come in and things happen, and obviously you have this week, next week, 3 weeks from now on a comic shop, and then also things come in into shops all the time, and I would imagine it's a balancing act. I mean, for me, I mean, the way I feel is that I deal with a lot of modern books. I knew things were dropping this week, so the last 2 weeks, obviously New York Comic Con was happening. So I had a real advantage that I knew a bunch of merch was dropping in the next 2 days. And I also knew certain things were dropping. And some of it I bought for myself. I'm totally selfish. That Dark Magician Girl Pop Funko is fire. So excited for it. I bought both versions, guys. Oh my God. I can't wait to get that thing signed. Can't wait to get that thing signed by Erica Schroeder. Cannot wait. I am so excited. But I digress. But all jokes aside, but I knew that this week certain things were going to drop, and I did, and I was fortunate enough to pick up that stuff, and I believe it will sell through in the next 2-3 weeks. But I don't even know what that looks like on a comic shop level, because obviously there are variants that come through, there's ratios that come through, there's different things that are coming through, and also it's an issue of this week's stack that happens, and then somebody comes into your shop and it's evaluation. I mean, I have to evaluate everything that comes across my desk every week. I mean, I've said this before, where there's legitly 60 to 100 positions that come across my desk between cards, comics, and then a bunch of other options that are collectibles. And that's not counting stocks, bonds, and a bunch of other stuff. That's a whole different ball game, whole different discussion. But I legitly have so many economic choices to make a week. And I don't know how it is in your world, John, in that regard. I think what Paul is saying is very interesting, and that's the creation side of everything of his choices.
Well, for me, it's the point that, like, yeah, you have people bringing collections in, but you also have things that you've ordered that you have on order. A lot of the stuff is like Sideshow. I do Sideshow toys, and I have to order those figures a year in advance. That's how much you have to put your order in, and they never hit their deadlines ever. So it's like all of a sudden last week, I'm thinking, all I have is to get my comics from Diamond and my Lunar Comics. Next thing I know, I get an invoice for $3,000. And I'm like, this hit a month early, and that's, and it also is like the difference, because I run an eBay store. I sell stuff on eBay. And to me, I can't compare the two. I can't. personally. It's so different because on
And,
an
and
eBay,
I'm not comparing.
no, I know. I'm just saying it's like when I put stuff on my eBay store and I sell out of everything, that's awesome. I'll go get some more stuff. Having a brick and mortar, you have to balance that act of selling enough to keep it open, but you got to keep your store filled all the time so people can come in. Because if somebody come in and bought everything, well, the next day my store's empty, nobody's going to come back in my store. And that's the biggest deal, because everybody's like, why don't you put this on eBay? Why don't you put that on eBay? And I'm like, then I have nothing to offer people when they walk in the door. So you got to find that good balance. And that's not always the funnest part to do.
No. I mean, I'm going to probably be on Whatnot in the next 2 months, and it is a struggle that I'm going to have to say, hey, what should I be putting on Whatnot? What should I be putting on my eBay? What could I create a differentiation on? What will sell better on eBay than on Whatnot? And that's probably going to be a 6-month experiment by definition. It could very well be that one book's on eBay and one book is on Whatnot, and we can see what the hell happens. And if all of a sudden, if someone's like, yo, you have another one of those and I have it on eBay and it's not moving, well, it might go to Whatnot. But vice versa, maybe, you switch things up where something doesn't sell on Whatnot. 3 months later, it's up on eBay, and something on eBay comes to Whatnot. I don't know.
Yep.
But it's a very tricky thing because I do want to create divergent merch. I
Right.
think it's a very, very important thing to do sometimes, to create 2 divergent paths with your merchandise, and because I think it gives a reason for people to come in. I would kind of be, and I'm going to say this very nicely, where if your shop and your eBay store were the exact same, there might not be a reason for me to come to your shop. I mean, to be honest, if like, I think you have Death of Superman on the back wall. If that was on your eBay store and everything in your shop was on your eBay store, there'd be no good reason for me to come to your shop.
Oh, granted, absolutely.
Versus a same thing with there'd be no reason, if I get everything I wanted, that you have in your store on if I was on eBay and it was still in your store, maybe I'd say, hey, look, why do I want to pay for the shipping? I want it right now. I'll just go to your store and get it. Right. So that's my whole thing, is that I think it's extremely important. I think this is another thing that people don't understand, is when you go into this space, it's very complicated, and money management is a real skill. It's a real skill. I mean, I don't think people understand managing and buying $35,000, an MSRP value of $35,000 worth of comics. What that looks like. I don't think most people in comics have any clue what that looks like and what type of nights those are. You're like, what the fuck did I just do?
Yeah.
There's been a few of those the last 8 months. Now, granted, I will say this, and it's very personal. I chose to expand my business while recovering from a surgery with my foot in a cast. And there was a reason why I did that, because I was home from my work for 6 months. So I was home actively in front of my laptop, able to manage the day-to-day operations. If I was in my office 2 or 3 days a week, that probably would not have happened. And people think I was crazy for doing what I did. No, it was extremely planned, the whole thing, because I knew I could manage the operations and logistics side of that. And I don't think people have a clue what that looks like on an operations and logistics side, unless you've done it. That's just my thoughts. And I understand that maybe people might not understand that. That's all right. But it's just so complicated. But I digress. I don't know. I don't like this awkward silence. I feel like I did something wrong when people are silent.
Oh, no, we're just listening to you. I mean,
yeah, no. I mean, I don't know. Whenever it comes to like eBay, I've never done an eBay store. My son's doing one, and he's been learning the process, and he's been getting tips from other people. People that sell at cons and people that sell on eBay stores. He's starting to understand it a little bit more. I still don't. Like I said, whenever I go to LCSs, I usually try to sell them my A covers, because I do want to keep my variants on my tables so that customers come see me for those variants. I've got some real nice variants. I think the Ariel variant.
Yeah, that thing is sick, bro. That thing is sick.
And I tell people, the only place you really can get that is on my table. That's usually the only place I sell it. I don't sell it to the LCSs.
Well, I might want some of those. I might want some more of those for my
Yeah,
store.
well, I'll sell it to you. But I mean, I don't usually sell it to the LCSs. I might give them, a store copy as a thank you whenever they bring me in as a table signing. But
That is your best cover. That is your best cover, hands down.
Well, that's not my most selling cover. My most selling is still the PTSD, the red one, and that one sells. Man, it just flies off my table. But I understand Ariel's cover is beautiful. Like I said, I try to keep some variants on there so that I can send people to the LCSs and be like, my comics are available at these LCSs, but if you want to get some special ones, and I always try to keep some of them signed from the cover artists as well. So there's special stuff at the table that they don't just get at the LCSs.
Yeah, let's actually talk because I'm curious on Johnny's comic shop side of this. Is that how do you feel about variants with indies? Because obviously, I think that the way I feel is that I run a variant Bad Girl Art eBay store. I absolutely love Bad Girl Art. It's like my favorite thing. My mom hates it, which makes me want to buy more.
Yeah, see, I know nothing about Bad Girl Art at all. At all. I mean,
all right, we're done here. We're done here.
That's not every title pretty much that we put out of Atrocity Press.
We're done here, guys. We're it's totally PC, PG, G. We're all good, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I've noticed the biggest is 5-6 years ago in comics, you go to your previews as a retailer, you put in your order, and you'd have your Spider-Man 56. And then you'd have 1 in 10 would be a variant. And then a 1 in 50 and a 1 in 100. That was your variants. The stores had to buy, 25, 50, 100 to get a variant. Let's go forward to present day. You got these big guns of DC and Marvel. They're like, you know what? These Kickstarters are selling 5 or 6, variant titles every month. Why don't we do that? So like when I go in to put an order in for DC or Marvel, there's literally 5 or 6 choices. And that's just, you can pick any one you want. It doesn't have to be a 1 in 25 or a 1 in 50. Now, granted, they still have a couple of those, but it's like the average comic has 4 or 5 variant covers every freaking month. What I hate the most about it as a consumer, because I collect comics, and even as a retailer, is usually your B, C, and D covers half the time. They don't even have them pictures of them yet. It's always coming soon. So it's like I have to order this on just the merit of that artist and have no idea if I'm going to like it or not. And which drives me up a wall because I'm like, how do you sell a variant cover without having the image for that variant cover? Granted, they do it, and they make their money on it. But I think that's the big difference now is there's so many options every month to a comic.
Did you also feel that there's all these store variants as well? Where I hate to say this, but I mean, obviously I just had Kyle Wilson on, I think 3 weeks ago. He's at New York Comic Con right now, and he has a store, Cowabunga Comics. You got KRS Comics, then you got 616. You used to have Frankie's. I don't know what the hell's going on with them. Me and Paul had a nice conversation about that for 2 hours. It was a lot of fun. But I digress right there. But there's all these Midtown Comics, and all of these comic shops have their own variants, and even artists now have their own variants. I mean, speak about Ariel Diaz. I think she's having her own coming out Sunday. And so there also is now a point where it's just everybody and their uncle has a variant to some degree. And forget about even just DC monthly. I mean, to me, I don't know if it's gotten out of hand. I mean, I like it because I get to choose whatever I want to choose, but it's a
con variants, all your con variants.
Yeah.
So there,
You know?
I don't know how you feel. And this will be the final question before I let everybody promote everything they want to promote.
Oh no. And we can go on. I mean, for me, the biggest thing is just it makes it hard because, like, for me as a comic, collector, I want to buy my comic like Marvel. I'll tell you right now, the best Marvel comic out there, in my opinion, is Daredevil. By far, it's one of the best stories. I'm really enjoying it. But it's like every month, it's like, God, 5 different covers I got to pick from. And it's like, there's so many people out there that they are completists. They want every single one, which as a retailer is great. Buy them all, but by the same token, it's also, as a collector, it's like, God, do you really need that many options? It's bad enough that you got 12 different Batman titles as it is, but now you're going to have 12 different covers for 12 different titles. I mean, that's an option of over 50 different Batman covers a month. And then, and then these companies are like, well, why aren't we selling like we used to? Well, you're making it harder to be a collector in some cases. I mean, you got a lot of your guys that they just are going to pick out their best cover, whatever. Or they just want the cover A. You got your subscribers that they like, I want one of every, no, I want Batman. I don't care what cover it is. Or I just want cover A. But I have noticed that there is a lot. Like for us, for Atrocity, we try to limit it where we don't go past 8. Because we know Kickstarters, people want we try not to go past 8.
I think
usually what we do is we do like 6 or 7 regulars, and then we do 1 or 2 of the non-safe for work because, yes, we're a bad girl comic company. So, but we try not to go crazy. I mean, there's Kickstarters out there that they got 20 to 30 different variant covers for one book.
I'll throw out some names. I mean, I like it. Astral Ticket. Guy does like 50 comics. I mean, Jim Noble, some people obviously are iffy, does a lot. I mean, Jim Noble pro Kickstarter, he had 100+ covers. That's a lot. I mean, there are other people who obviously, and look, I mean, I don't know how you guys count it, but if you have a regular cover and then you have a new cover, I don't count the nude cover as a second cover. Obviously, in the printing side of things, it is. But if you have Safe for Work A and then you have Nude A, I don't consider that an additional cover as far as costs. Obviously, in printing it is. But I do think there gets a point where if you have, I mean, I piece out after 6. If you have more than 6, I might back your campaign, but I'm like, 6 is where I'm at. I think 6 is more than enough. I really do. I think 6 is pushing it. I think 8 is pushing it beyond. And I think if you have 10 or 15, it's like, I feel like you're incurring costs.
For us, a lot of times, though, our non-safe for work is different art. It's not always just like we have the filter. It's like Human Hunters that's coming out. Mateus did a regular cover and a non-safe for work. Totally 2 different pieces of art.
Yeah.
In those cases, I count our non-safe for work as different arts. You have your filters.
I will take the L.
I've never done a non-safe for work cover. I have done 6 covers for Bushibu, but that was because they were dedicated to each one of my kids. Me personally, I've always been a 1 cover per book kind of guy, but whenever I started in on my path of creating comics, I started asking people. I did a survey and everybody loved variants. So on all of my books, I do at least 3 covers. On PTSD, it had 3 covers. On Cryptic Haze and Prelude's got 5, but that's because there's 2 store variants out that's going to come out with it. But both those 3 had 3 covers each, and then Bushibu had 6, like I said. But that was just because it was dedicated to each one of my kids. But I understand a lot of customers love the variants, and you got to play to your customer base.
Well, see, we do something different. I mean, the one thing we do, no matter who the artist is, our cover A is the interior artist.
Yeah,
we've always done that because, which is great. Max started, and it's something that I've been saying for years. I hate picking up a comic and having a wonderful cover and then have crap art on the inside. It ticks me off. So I always believe that cover A, you should be able to see what you're going to get. If you're not good enough to do a cover, don't hire them from interiors. I mean, period. We do a lot of matrix. We keep track of every single Kickstarter we do and what covers sell. And we see if there's trends. Mariah Benz does every one of our cover Bs, always. And we have people that always buy a Mariah cover. Like right now, we do a lot of combos, a cover A and a non-safer work for that artist. And, and we sell a lot of the combos. So we started, hey, we're going to do more combos. A lot of the artists we've gotten, hey, can you do a regular variant and a non-safe for work variant? That's only because the trend right now is we sell a lot of them. So we're going to go that route. I think a lot of it, going back to how we started all this, is looking at it as a product, looking at it as a brand, and always keeping track to know that the market's always changing. It's like the stock market. Honestly, the best example I had is Echo, her first appearance. It sat here on my wall for $15. $15. Thor, the God Killer, sat here on my wall for $15. All of a sudden, Disney Plus says, hey, we're going to make a movie with this guy in it. Hey, we're going to do an Echo store. I sold Thor the God. I changed the price on it. It went for $250 in like a 2-week period. It jumped from like 15 to 250 because of a Disney announcement.
Yeah.
That really shows that and people ask about comics, like, how do you price them? I go, I kind of judge off eBay, what's already sold on eBay. Well, don't you use guides? I go, guides can't keep it up to date as quick. I go, because really we're living in a walking stock market. Comics are going to fluctuate. Action figures fluctuate. A figure that might be worth $10, Disney's going to say, hey, we're going to make this a great character. Now it's going to be worth a lot more.
So I used to buy a lot of Pop Funkos. So there was a Carnage Pop Funko from New York Comic Con 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So $15, Hot Topic is selling the shared exclusives. Basically, 3 months after New York Comic Con, the Pop Funko is selling for $5 on eBay. All day, $5. Fast forward, the movie's announced, that Pop Funko is selling for $65. So somebody probably had the wherewithal to buy like 10 or 15 of them for $5 a pop, and then sold them each for $50 and made a clean bunch of easy. And I had 2 of them, and I sold both of mine for $55. Now I paid $15 for both of mine, but again, all of a sudden now Carnage is that Pop Funko is trading for maybe $10, $15. So it fluctuates. And
I had the same thing. The Black Series before COVID, a guy traded me a case of Captain Rex, and he had gotten them off, I think it was Ross, $5 a piece, right? A case of Captain Rex. And I'm like, all right, they sit in my basement. We go through COVID. I start unpacking things to open up the store, and adding to the store. I look on eBay, Captain Rex is going for $120. I paid $5 a piece for these suckers. It's the market, it's constantly fluctuating. Yeah. And I think, anybody that's going to do a Kickstarter, anybody that's going to do an eBay store, anybody that does a physical store, the best advice I could get is never, ever get set in your ways.
Right.
You got to constantly change.
We know, I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. And I have a good relationship with Zenescope. I used to be 80% Zenescope in my eBay store, and I cut them down to 20%. So I made a dramatic change in my eBay store and what I bring in, and I'm bringing in a lot more merch, and I'm always looking for more merch to bring in and trying to figure out what sells and new companies and building new relationships. But that's a big change, and that's a recent change. That's maybe 9 months ago. And it took a lot because it was a terrifying change. But all of a sudden, because of that change, I'm now selling more, and I'm figuring out what's working, what's not working. And I also test books. So I will take a 15-book risk. So if I buy 15 books from somebody, I'm going to see how those books do. And if your books sell, I want to buy another 15. And then maybe I'll buy 20, 25, 30, and we'll see where the breaking point is. And that's the whole thing. And this is why I think it's really interesting, because I'm in a stage as a business where I get to do that. And I think it's really, really, really important that people experiment I have no problem losing $100 on an experiment. That is the price I'm willing to pay on a business. But I'm not going to go and buy 250 comics. And this is my problem with Scout. And not to blast Scout, but a store variant from Scout is going to run me $1,500 for 250 copies versus I would love to test 50 books with them. And that's my problem, is that I understand why they run their business their way, but that could sink a business. And I think it's really, really important because I was speaking with Tom Hutchinson, and the more flexible you can be, the better off you're going to be in business. And that's the biggest piece of advice I've ever gotten from Tom Hutchinson about anything. And I think it's so relevant. I think it's so relevant to what I'm doing, what everybody should be doing in Kickstarter. But it's interesting because another thing I want to bring up is that I had Alt Simpson on, and what he said about his campaign on another podcast, and he said, before I ran mine, I looked at what everybody was doing on Kickstarter, and I saw what was selling, and I copied what they were doing.
Yeah. And
I copied that trend. And guess what? He's not necessarily doing hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you might be doing 9,000 to 10,000 a campaign. And there's nothing wrong with saying, let me see what's working and what isn't working, and let me copy what's working. And when it stops working, let me see what went wrong. And I think, but it's complicated because I think people are terrified to experiment. But that's just what I think. But again, I mean,
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I experiment a lot on Kickstarter. I will probably this year lose $1,200 to $1,500 because of experiments on eBay alone, just because I probably am going to be bringing in the next 12 months books that are probably not going to move. But the other side is that I will bring in winners that will move and make me so much more money that they will wipe out my losses and then some. And then guess what happens in my world is that the books that I lose on, obviously I could probably write it off tax-wise. This is not tax advice, so do not perceive it to be. I want to make that crystal clear. Please speak to your CPA. Just I am not your tax advisor. That is not my job, and nor do I want to be. I just need to make that crystal clear. But the goal is that if a book fails that I brought 15, I don't pick that up again, and I will systematically eliminate until I find the things that work. And it could very well be that at some point that things shift, and it happens. But I just think it's so interesting, and this is why I like this business, because I am in the stock market, and I love that too. And this is my problem. This is why I love this industry, because this is like exactly what I'm doing, and it's speculation business, and it works. And for me, it's gamified. That's how I feel. But I also understand that I built bases, because I know Star Wars is going to sell. Anything that references Star Wars on a cosplay cover is going to sell eventually.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of when it sells, and I know Shikari is going to sell.
I got a Star Wars homage on Bushibu 1, and it sells really well as well. So, I mean, you're right. Whenever you got some things that sell, Ariel's Diaz's sell, and Ken Salinas sell, all of those are Bushibu. It is one of those things that you do have to try some things and figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work, because you never know who your audience is going to be until you get to them. And then once you get to them, then you kind of know where you're going. But if you don't know, like I got 4 IPs. With PTSD is going to have a different audience than Bushibu Circus Mysteries. And that was one of the things that I was glad that I had 6 covers on Bushibu, because I could play with some of the stuff and figure it out. And I could add different tiers to it. So, I mean, it really depends on what your customers are looking for and who you find as a customer base.
Yep.
So I do want to back out of this, and I do want to touch upon something else before I give everybody a chance to promote themselves. And we should talk about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. So I rooted for them. That's what America needs.
I'm out. I'll see you guys. I live in Kansas City. I don't need to hear any more about that. That's all I hear about everywhere I go.
No, I don't want to talk about that, but obviously I'm joking. I was very, very excited, and I made a good decision where there was an autograph of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce on like an autograph book for $1,500, and I graciously decided against buying it because it's a little too rich for my blood. If it was $1,400, I would have been all in. I just want to make that crystal clear.
Right.
But I do think it's good for football. I do think it is an overall positive for football, without a doubt. But anyway, now if Kansas City would win a little bit better, that'd be much more advised. I mean, if their relationship gets Kansas City to be dominant, I'll be very happy. In case anybody hasn't realized, I'm gambling on Kansas City, even though I live in Connecticut. So if they play the Giants, I'm all in on Kansas City, but that's a given. But I digress. I don't actually want to talk about that. That's after hours, guys. That's when we all have a few beers in us. But anyway, I do actually want to touch upon something that's a little bit outside of the scope to end this, because I think it's a really good position. And it's one of my favorite questions is that, what do you think the health of comics is, and even the industry as a whole, and even creators? Because right now I feel it is, and I know it's a little bit outside the scope, but right now I feel that a lot of creators are struggling. I think a lot of creators don't necessarily have good advice given to them. I feel that a lot of creators don't even know where to turn for advice. And I don't think we have a creativity problem in comics anymore. I think we have a bunch of other problems of money management, business advice, maybe slow down, calm down a little bit, take a breather, type of things. And I'm curious how the two of you, because I'm on a very different spectrum right now, in a very different area, because I haven't produced a book. So I don't have those stresses of producing a book and if it's going to sell and going to a con, because I'm just buying people's books and flipping them and moving them and selling them. And it's very different. So I don't have that stress, but I see it, if that makes any sense.
So, I mean, I think that's two really different things whenever you're talking about a creator and like the industry itself. I think as far as creators are concerned, there's going to be a lot of them that are having a little bit of tough time. It is a crowded field, and there's a lot more that are just kind of coming out of the woodwork. You got actors that are making comics, and you got, like you said, all these variants, whether they're from the industry or from the stores, from the artists themselves. They're just flooding the market a little bit. I don't think that the industry is doing that bad as far as a creator. I don't think that I've been struggling. I think things have been going just about the way they have been for me, which has been decent. I mean, not great. I'm not a millionaire yet. But again, it's been covering the bills, so I think it's been okay. People say that the LCSs are going down, and I can't speak for everybody, but I see the LCSs in DFW, and I was part of a grand opening 2 weeks ago, which was Collected in Irving, and that's their third brick and mortar. They were opening their third store, and then in November 4th, I'm going to be at my sponsor's Geek Out second brick and mortar that they're grand opening. So I don't think that the LCSs are exactly hurting that bad. It could be a little bit of the management. I mean, it could be some of the books, but I don't think they're hurting as bad as most people are saying. I could be wrong, but around here, it looks like it's going okay.
Well, I think here it's going all right. I think, the big thing, like for me, it's different because I'm not just a comic. I do gaming. I do magic. And I think that's what's helping me out. I'm diversified. Somebody can come in here and they can order from 15 to 20 different wholesalers. You can't do that in every single shop. And I think the ones that are going to, diversify, the ones that are going to look at different ways of selling things and buying than just comics. Because I don't have the pull lists I used to have. I mean, as far as like pull lists and comic readers, because there is a lot of people that they want it on their phone, they want it on their pad. Same thing as Barnes and Nobles. You don't have the same amount of, bookstores around anymore because people are buying them, on their pad, on their Kindle. It's the same thing with comics. Where we can stay alive is doing those variant covers, doing that different artwork and not having it where you can get it through a Kindle. Don't have it where you can get it online. Back to, like you and your eBay store. It's making sure you have those comics where people are buying them kind of like bonds and stocks. They're hoping that later on they're going to cost more, so people are buying them as collectibles, not just to read. And I think that's where you're always going to have some people looking at them for collectibles. The problem you have with a lot of the readers is, I see a lot of people moving to indies because they know the big guns are phoning it in anymore. And they're tired of these big events. And, oh, my God, here's Spider-Man, but here's another event where I got to buy 18 books to know what's going on. And I think, that really says a lot about how much they're not paying attention to this generation. This next generation are all about reels. They want to watch a video for 20 minutes. For 3 or 4 minutes. They don't want to watch a 20-minute show. They want a reel. It's the same thing as comics. They want to be able to read a comic and know the story, or read 2 or 3 and know a story. They're not going to invest in 18 different books. That's your collectors. They're going to collect in those. They're going to invest in the 18. But I think that, that's pretty much I think it's always going to be here as a collectible. I think it's just going to change.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered it. I know Andrew's yawning over here. I think he's about ready to wrap this up.
No. I mean, my thoughts is that I've said this for a while, where my whole thing is that I think exclusivity is going to be dominant. I think it's coming.
Yep.
I think it's been here for a while, and I think it's now starting to be becoming permanent, where a Mount Olympus book has 65 or less copies. So that's why it has value. I mean, I just backed the Kickstarter where one of the covers has 50 copies, and it's not going to get reprinted. That's a rare book. Whether, that book fetches $900 or not is not the point. It's the idea that if that book 3-4 years from now, somebody wants it, it's only 50 copies of that book. And the nice version has less than the naughty version, which is even crazier. It's a weird one. And I'm a little shocked. And obviously, I have a good relationship with the person's book. And I don't feel like saying who it is because I don't know if I can at the moment. But I don't want to put somebody on the spot per se. But my point is that I think exclusivity. I mean, there's a reason why Mount Olympus books sell for $50, $60 on a $20 book. It's 24 hours, 65 copies. And most of those copies sell out. And so that's just how I feel, is that that's going to be dominant. And there's a reason why people want it, because they miss out on that 24 hours, or it sells out, or better yet, Mount Olympus has books that only have 15 copies. Like, you missed out. I mean, they did a Sailor Jupiter cover of a holofoil, and there's 15 copies, and they sold out. So I have 2 of them. So the price is whatever I want to set it at, because they don't come up. They don't come up. So if I ask $70 for it, you're probably not going to find another one. And now I could set whatever price I want to, unless somebody else says, "Oh man, that thing sold for 70. I'll sell mine for 65." And then I'll put mine at 60. We'll see who wins. But not the point. But the idea is that when you have 15 copies of a book, there's not. I mean, that's what demands value. But that's just what I think, and I think it's interesting. But I don't disagree. I agree. Diversification is king. I mean, that's what my business is built on. The whole point of my eBay business is to legitimately take my profit and put it into the stock market, and then collect dividends. And it is a diversified business that is a closed managed fund, for lack of a better word, and funds itself on top of then being able to take a distribution. And I'm a strong believer that everybody should build a business like that. But I digress on that. That's a whole different discussion. I love financial education. Anybody who wants to talk about that with me, I will go on for hours and we'll have a great time. But I don't want to dive into that. That's a different one of these collective financial education, but more than happy to do and speak about it all day with anybody who wants to talk about it. But I do want to give both of you a chance to promote yourselves again. Where can people find you, bother you, hit you up, check out where you're at, all that stuff, campaigns going on, cool stuff like that.
All after you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm Paul Gomez, 790. Like I always tell people, if you're ever looking for any advice on creating comics or any advice of what that I have, if I don't have the answer, I will look for it or point you in the right direction. Paul Gomez, 790. I'm usually on Facebook more than Instagram and Twitter. I do have my show that's on YouTube. That is Paul Gomez, 790 on YouTube. One of the main things I always say is if you're having a bad day and if you need somebody to talk to and you can't find someone, send me a message. It's okay not to be okay. Just don't live there.
All righty. I'm Johnny Reed. I'm owner of Brute Squad Entertainment in Kansas City, Comics, Toys, Games. You can find me at atrocitypress.com with my partner in crime, Max DeVille. We do Human Hunters, Ninja Bimbos, and Mary Machine Gun. Human Hunters will be launched, if not next week, the following. We're wrapping that Kickstarter up, and we'll be launching it soon, issue 4. Actually, it's just in time for Halloween because the whole thing is a flashback to the Salem witch trial. So if you want something creepy, you're going to get it. And there you have it. I would like to say, Andrew, by the way, thank you so much for having me on here. It is always a pleasure visiting with you, and I really appreciate you inviting me along.
Oh, anytime. Nobody else wants to hang out with me on a Friday night anyway, so it's all good. No,
Right.
No. I like doing this because this is a very different show than other things, and we're actually talking about issues that I think need to be spoken about in a very open way, and that's the whole point of this. Obviously, you know, if people want to come on my show, they could hit me up, and I will try to get people on. I've said this before. I say it almost every other week where if you want an interview, you should probably hit me up because I don't pay attention to everything. I got a lot of stuff going on. And I'm like, hey, you got a book going on. It's your responsibility to find me. It's not my responsibility to find you. So I'm more than happy to have you and Max on at any point during your campaign. Just reach out to me. That goes for anybody else. Reach out to me and I will try. I can't make any guarantees. Because I do get booked pretty quickly. And
we
also,
appreciate that.
Also, if you're an asshole to me, and I'll say this, and you're disrespectful to my show, and there's been a bunch of people who have, on a very professional level, you will not get on. And I'm not going to mention names, but there was a particular booker who did something that was uncalled for, and him and his clients won't get on my show. But I digress. on that point.
All right.
But again, we're not mentioning names here. But enough about that. But I do want to promote myself really quickly. Obviously, I am Andrew. There's on Facebook. You can friend me. You can find me. I am Pop Anime Comics on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Check me out. You can find me. I have like 500 plus interviews. And you can absolutely go check out my YouTube channel. And I promise that you will be entertained. I don't know if you will get smarter, but you will be entertained on that front. And I have an eBay store called Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. So if you're looking for really rare books and cool stuff like that, I got some for you. Or if you're looking for really cool cards, I have a lot of trading cards and autograph stuff up there. So that's something that if you're looking at that stuff, and I'm always willing to accept offers. So feel free to offer or just reach out to me on eBay and we can work something out. And I also have some cool merch coming out. So that's everything that I got. And on that note, everybody, I appreciate both of you being here. And I'm going to call that a wrap.